All right, good morning, everybody. Today we are talking about Nexus payables and specifically the approver role within Nexus. This is the role that is very specific and assigned to property managers. Even if you're a property manager that has the ability to create purchase orders and work with invoices in Nexus, the approver role that we're talking about today is strictly to approving purchase orders or invoices that other people work on. So your service manager or your assistant manager and so forth. To do that today, we are going to start off with kind of the big picture, make sure we're all on the same page. Work through the Nexus home screen, just a few little differences between the approver role and the purchase order or invoice coder role. Yeah, 10 times fast. We'll talk about exactly how to approve purchase orders, what to remember when approving catalog purchase orders, when you might need to approve invoices, and also rejecting items should we need to. I actually did add just a little bit. We will wrap up with touching on reports and showing you where those reports are located and a magnificent guide on which ones to use and what they show you and just basically how cool they all are. All right, so there's 4 different roles within Nexus on site. We are looking at the PO coder, that's our service manager, right? They can create purchase orders. We've got our PO invoice coder. That's our assistant manager. They can create purchase orders and process invoices. The approve or reject functions that we're talking about today relate specifically to these 2 roles. So we're only approving what these 2 roles were to create. And there you are. There's your approver as a property manager. You can approve or reject purchase orders and invoices as well. If you're a property manager without an assistant manager, generally you have 250 units or less, you will combine all roles, but you still have to be able to approve or reject anything your service manager creates. So that's what we're focusing in on. How does your role as an approver fit into the overall workflow? So just a refresher, the Nexus workflow is 9 steps. Everything starts with the purchase order. And this is something that we really need to drive home with our entire team, that before we incur any expense with any vendor, the purchase order needs to be created and approved. That's the key to making Nexus successful for our community, is following that time frame. There you are. So the purchase order is approved by the property manager. You are the gatekeeper of your finances. So if we're following our policies, if we're not ordering things before we've got an approved purchase order, then you know absolutely every dime that is spent on site. After that, we order the products or services from our vendor, at which point the vendor faithfully fulfills our order and sends the invoice to us. 3 different ways. They could either upload it straight to Nexus, creating their own Vendor Connect account, basically cuts out the middleman, or they could send it straight to Nexus by snail mail or email. If it goes to Nexus, they scan and upload it. So either the vendor scans and uploads it, or they send it to Nexus for them to scan and upload it. On site, we will not have anything to do with actually touching paper invoices. If a vendor tries to deliver an invoice to us, it's a conversation that's really worth having in saying, you know what, gosh, I appreciate you getting this to me in a timely manner, but it's going to take you longer to get paid if the invoice comes to us. Right? The invoice needs to get sent straight to Nexus. That's the point, and that's how we're going to save time on site. Our purchase orders and our invoices are linked together. So once we have our uploaded invoice, we're going to go find the approved purchase order relating to that invoice and link them together. That copies all of our approvals and so forth, line items, our coding, everything over. After that, the completed invoice is submitted for processing. Here's the other part where you as an approver might come back in, is if that invoice is outside of the threshold. And I know we touched on it in the last class, but we will circle back to it today, just make sure we're on the same page again. If your purchase order and your invoice are over 10% dollar amount difference from each other, property managers need to approve it one more time before it heads to our accountant for approval, and ultimately our accounts payable team to actually cut the check, get our vendor paid. So how do you approve purchase orders? And which purchase orders do you approve? So you're going to approve all manually created purchase orders and all purchase orders that are created through a vendor catalog. So basically all of them. The only purchase orders you will not be approving are those over $5,000. Those trigger regional manager approval. Everything else is going to come through you. If you're in that hybrid property manager role, any purchase order you create will self-approve. And again, we want to remember, make sure that we're approving these quickly and on a regular basis. We should be in Nexus multiple times a day just to approve any purchase orders in there. Because if not, we could be holding our teams up since they can't order anything from our vendors until a purchase order is approved. So we want to make sure that workflow is correct by staying on top of Nexus and just approving purchase orders. As we're about to see, it's a very quick and easy process. So let's jump back in Nexus here. And I'm logged in now as an approver. You'll notice there's just a few less options as the previous role, that purchase order coder, invoice coder role. Your to-do items as a property manager in the approver role specifically is purchase orders to approve and invoices to approve. That's it. Everything else is there as an FYI. It's great to keep track of it. But if you have both your service and assistant managers in Nexus, then you'll be focused on these two keys. So let's take a look at purchase orders to approve. Those will appear at the bottom of our screen here. And let's go ahead and pick on one of these guys. We'll just click on the vendor name to open up that purchase order. Now keep in mind, we can't change any purchase orders that were created by our teams. It's part of the accountability and transparency. But it's also a part of a learning curve, right? The only way they're going to learn is if we are communicative and open with them and really invested in training our teams and getting everyone on the same page. So we can't change anything, but we are still going to review it very thoroughly. So we want to make sure that our vendor is correct, that we've got the right vendor ID and address picked. We need to make sure that the priority is correct. Then we need to review our line items. Is the description in line with what Mission Rock wants? Is the unit number or term of service listed first? If it's for a specific apartment, did we also pick that apartment in our drop-down list? It would list right below it. Did we select the right GL account for this? Is it over budget? Is the dollar amount reasonable? If over budget, are our over budget notes correct? We're in magical training land, so some of these examples are going to be a little odd. Bear with me. But if everything here looks right, it's as easy as clicking approve at the top of the screen. This purchase order goes from pending approval to now being called released, which is really weird, I know. Nexus calls it released instead of approved. Don't know why. But it's the same thing. So released equals approved. Same thing. We're good to go. Our teams can now place this order. And we also get a purchase order number. Mission Rock right now, we don't need that for anything, but some vendors are like, oh, okay, what's the PO number? If they need that, this is where you'll find it at the top of the purchase order, only again after it's been approved. And that's it. It's as easy as reviewing it and clicking approve. If you want a handy checklist, at the end of the Mission Rock policy manual for Nexus, there's actually a checklist for purchase orders and a checklist for invoices. So until you get super used to it, it can help guide you in, okay, what all do I need to look at on this screen to ensure that it's correct? Okay, before I move on, I do see a question here. Do we need to make purchase orders for petty cash? No, ma'am. So petty cash, expense request, check request, and CapEx, those four are processed without purchase orders. in which case we send our documentation to Nexus, they upload it as an invoice, and we would code the line item straight on that invoice. And then I do see one more question here. Before I move to that, one more thing on petty cash and those exceptions. Those exceptions actually have their own special class, so it's called Nexus Mission Rep Policies, and that course will cover any exceptions to these processes. This will get you up and running in Nexus. That will fill in any of the gaps that are missing here. And then, okay, the next question is, what if your assistant is off that day and didn't delegate to you? Then in that case, it would just be an extra day before we get things processed, or the assistant, we could trigger a delegation through going through the help desk. So if we go to the help desk and ask for a delegation, they can kind of force one on the back end. So if it's something urgent, if it's an emergency, you could definitely go through that way as well. All right, I don't see any other questions. Here's what you need to remember when you're approving purchase orders that came from a catalog purchase. So remember, our vendor catalogs are going to be Staples and HD Supply. They're going to look the same. They're going to look exactly the same as a regular purchase order. But the only difference is down here, right underneath the description, sorry, I was trying to highlight it. You'll see an item number, and that's how you know it's for a vendor catalog. Reason I wanted to bring them up, let's make sure our descriptions are still accurate. The beauty of vendor catalogs is you place your order through the same general online system that you're used to, but by accessing it through Nexus, it fills a purchase order out for you. It's a great way to save time for our teams, saves a lot of time for our service managers, specifically with HD Supply. However, when our line items are auto-filled, we get whatever descriptions are in the HD Supply or Staples systems. So let's say we order garbage disposal. HD Supply does not call it garbage disposal, right? It calls it 1/3 MHKZ stainless steel unit, 2.5 ounce, whatever. It's a really long, weird description. We don't need that description, right? This description filters to Yurti, which ends up on our owner's reports. That doesn't do us any good. So we would need to revise it, and it's, again, what I'm training our teams to do, to say garbage disposal, right, and which unit it's going into. So with vendor catalogs, let's make sure that we have those descriptions updated before we approve them. And also just keep in mind, even if it is a quote-unquote online order for the vendor has no idea this order even exists until you approve the purchase order for it. So let's say that this is a purchase order for HD Supply. I want to get this approved as early as I can in the day so that HD Supply will receive the order as early in the day as they can to hopefully get a next day turnaround on fulfilling that order. Okay, so I've talked a lot about approval. Let's talk about rejection. So rejection is not always a bad thing, and I don't want there to be kind of a tainted, oh, rejection's terrible type of outlook on it. Rejection is a learning curve. And rejection is what we'll do if anything needs to be corrected. So remember, you do not have access to make modifications to purchase orders that anybody else created. So if an edit is needed, the PO has to be rejected. Usually it's for something small. The GL is wrong, the vendor, the description, the line item, something little just needs to be corrected before the PO is approved and can be processed. Sometimes the rejection could be for a bigger reason. Maybe we're no longer using that service, or maybe we're in a lawsuit with that vendor. Why do I mention that? We need to enter notes very specifically whenever we reject anything. Our notes are also the only way our team is going to learn. If we just say, this is wrong, fix it, well, that doesn't help them know, okay, what was wrong? What should I do next time? Why do I need to make these changes? And help engage that learning transfer for going forward. Now, if you're noticing that you're having to reject a lot of purchase orders, there's different reports that you can pull to see what specific areas we can work on. So there's an audit trail on every single purchase order. That's our history log. That shows who touched the purchase order and when. There's also reports that you can filter by rejections to see the reasons why things are rejected in general. If you're seeing that 20 invoices this week were rejected based on the invoice number being incorrect, well, let's sit down and have a conversation about what the invoice number standards are. There's great tools out there to help. So let's go back to our dashboard here, and let's find a purchase order that we will ultimately reject. We'll go under purchase orders to approve, and I think this one would be good. Okay, so this is a purchase order for Alliance Floor Services, and it looks like we want to put new carpet in. Okay, well the GL is correct, but what am I missing here? I'm missing a unit number. This new carpet is going somewhere, right? So we would want to reject this item, this purchase order, with the notes to insert our unit number in the line item, both in the description and the little drop-down box. So let's click on reject up at the top of our screen, and it wants two reasons. So first, it's going to be in general. This is how you can filter your reports later, so it's important to select the right one. And in this case, we're looking at an incorrect description. So I would want to say add unit number to line item description and select the unit number in the drop-down box. Once you select save, that's it. That's all you got to do. This purchase order is now rejected. It takes you back to your dashboard. You'll see that you have one less to approve. And now if you look under rejected purchase orders, that number has increased. And just for reference, when we go back to that purchase order, here's what our teams will see. So under the notes section, they will see both lines. So they'll see the reason and the rejection note. Here's that history log, that audit trail. It shows when it was created, when it was submitted for approval, when it was rejected, and so forth. The rejection, definitely not a bad thing, but let's just keep an eye on the reasons why and see if we can't help our teams out just a little bit in if there's anything that needs to be cleared up. That's purchase orders. Let's talk about invoices. So there's only one time you would need to approve invoices as a property manager. And that is if that invoice exceeds the purchase order invoice threshold. It's 10%. So your invoices will be automatically approved if they're within 10% above or below the approved purchase order total. If they are not, then you will see them for approval before they head on to your accountant for processing. So let's put this into numbers. What if our purchase order was approved for $200? All right, 10% of that is $20. So our threshold then becomes $20 above or below that. If the invoice comes in anywhere between $180 and $220, we're not going to see it. We've already approved the purchase order, so we know that we anticipate and approve that expense. It's going to move forward to our accountant automatically. That's what's going to help us account for tax, for shipping cost. If we're, off a couple of dollars on the item, these things change. So that threshold is what saves us from having to do double work all the way around. Now, if it's outside of that threshold, so if it's under $180 or over $220, we do want to see that. We want to get our eyes on it one more time. So as a property manager, we will be approving that invoice before it goes to our accountant. Did the vendor charge us differently than what they said they would? Did they overcharge us? Did we order more than was approved? Or was it less than we expected? Did we, just save money? That's so exciting. Now I know from my projections, we're going to be just a little bit under budget in that category. When you have an invoice to approve, it's the same process as when you have a purchase order to approve. It will show up over here in invoices to approve. You would select the invoice. It will pull up that side-by-side screen. double check the invoice on the left, the coding and processing information on the right, and click Approve. Easy breezy. A question I hear pretty often is, what is completed invoices to approve? Don't worry about it. That's for your accountant. Completed means that we on site have completed everything that we have to do for this invoice. Now it's just waiting for everybody else's approval, so your accountant. Only ones you're concerned with are purchase orders to approve and invoices to approve. That will help out. All right, I don't see any questions. So we talked about approving invoices. One more note before we head away from this. If you see an invoice and it does not have a purchase order with it, unless it's one of those exceptions, which we mentioned earlier, petty cash, check request, expense reimbursement request, or CapEx invoices, unless it is one of those four, it absolutely has to have a purchase order with it, no matter what. So if something comes through without a purchase order, it's not one of those exceptions, reject it. If you don't, your accountant will. So let's go ahead and save the time from it having to go through multiple rounds of approval to get rejected, and keep an eye on it right off the bat. Along those lines, if you ever see an invoice come through for approval that does not have an image with it, so if it actually doesn't display the invoice on the left, we can't pay that. We have to have the image. It doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while, just in case, know to reject that item as well. All right, let's talk about some of the reporting features. So Nexus is pretty nifty. We have reports under the Go Figure Reports tab up at the top of our screen. We have reports based on purchase orders, invoices, vendors, and budget. They're listed separately for a reason. Anything relating to purchase orders is under the PO register. Anything related to invoices is under the invoice register. It's important to keep that in mind. So depending on what you're ultimately looking for, you might need to use both report types or one or the other. So let's take a look at our PO register reports here real fast. In here, you have a lot of different filtering options. So we would have our report type. So what is the report? Here's the one I was talking about for rejection notes. You would have your format. You can select for specific vendors, for specific accounting months. Keep in mind accounting month, not calendar month. Statuses, GL accounts, who it was created by, who it was approved by. There's many, many filters. So how do you know what they all do? This is kind of one of my favorite guides ever, you guys. And I'm a fan of manuals and guides, and I've made a lot of them. This one is from Nexus, and I just adore it. I get all googly-eyed over this. Okay, so over on the right-hand side of your screen in Nexus, there's a help button. We're going to click on that, and that's going to take us to Nexus's manuals. And the one we're looking for is Introduction to Reporting. It's amazing. And here's why. I'm going to show it to you. So in this manual here, and you can print it out so you don't have to look at it on like a half screen, but what it's going to do is it shows you the, wait for it, shows you the reports. It shows you each type of report. So for example, under your invoices, which different report types are listed. But here's where it gets really, really, really exciting. It will show you the very detailed information for each type of report. So if I'm like, hey, what does a pending approval report show me? It will tell me. What does a modified GL report show me? It will tell me. It's a wonderful, wonderful group of information. You also have different labels here for your filters. So what different options for this filter do I have, and what does that filter tell me? All right, it's helpful. It breaks it down by PO, by invoice, by vendor, and by budget. And again, this Introduction to Reporting Manual is found using the Help button in the upper right-hand corner of Nexus. Anything you're looking for, it's going to help you find, that is for sure. Our invoice register reports, pretty similar. You have quite a few different options of what types of reports you're looking for. And again, many, many different filters that you can use as well. Hey, guess what? That's what I have for you today. So where do you go for help in Nexus? In addition to your accountant and the various manuals that we've talked about, there's 2 sections within the help desk that will be there for you. So in the help desk, we've got Nexus administrative support. That is to get something corrected in Nexus. Your request type would be computer systems, Nexus from there. You also have training support. That comes to me, but only if you pick your request type as training and then pick Nexus after that. I will gladly get you guys taken care of.